Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard. My guest is Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors in Business Association. His website, icba.ca. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Jordan, the BC government hasn't brought it in yet, but they're saying they're going to bring in a new old-growth forestry policy. How devastating would this policy be to the province and the economy if it was brought in as is?
Well, it would be devastating. And look, it's hard to overstate just how crippling this would be to a number of forest-dependent communities in British Columbia and actually cities throughout BC. You don't have to have active timber operations going on to feel the effects of the forestry industry in British Columbia. It's underpinned our economy for generations. It's one of the great natural renewable resources we have. And instead of looking for ways to continue it, all of a sudden, the NDP shifted gears and are trying to kill it. So, the experts tell me up to 18,000 jobs on the line. Likely to be lost. Between 14 and 20 mills will be closed because of these policies. This is a substantial blow to the BC economy, to BC taxpayers, and most importantly to those families who rely on forest jobs to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. So, red alert. Pay attention, everyone. This is a big deal for the BC economy.
The First Nations Forestry Council is totally upset. They weren't consulted. They've been given 30 days to put in their 25 cents worth.
Yeah, this is just one of the many head-scratching details of how the NDP government has rolled this out. This is the government that very proudly brought in UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples legislation in the last term. They promised specifically they would consult with First Nations, Indigenous groups on issues like these that affect their rights and their choices, and they didn't. It's very clear they did. They consulted with a very small group of people on a panel, 4 of whom have connections, 80% of whom had connections to anti-forestry movements, and left the Indigenous people out of it. It's a shocking turn of events. I know Indigenous groups feel like they're scrambling a bit here. 30 days to respond to a massive document and basically an industry killing planned by the government. That's not a lot of time. And, we talk about 18,000 jobs. We talk about between 14 and 20 sawmills. Lots of those jobs, lots of that revenue ends up in the hands of Indigenous groups because they're the ones who are managing their forests now. So, scary times for sure, and another example of how the NDP government says one thing and then does another.
4 of the 5 people on the advisory committee were from anti-logging groups. Isn't that like 4 out of 5 people on the chicken farming committee being made up of coyotes?
That's exactly what it's like. Forestry gets such a bad rap in this province, and it's not deserved in any way. I mean, we can't overstate how important it is to the economy, number one. But number two, this is a renewable resource. In BC, there are almost 14 million hectares of old-growth trees. We're not talking about, saving like the last couple of trees. There's 14 million hectares of old-growth trees. And within that, 10 million hectares are already protected and would never be harvested. So you're talking about, 3.7 million hectares that are available for harvest. That is not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things. There's all sorts of protections in parks. There's protections in huge swaths of crown land throughout the province. Wood as well, renewable resource. What amazes me about this is, you have you mentioned the committee that oversaw this. Many of them apparently have connections to the Sierra Club. At least that's what the criticism from the Steelworkers Union has been, who represents many forestry workers. So you would think the Sierra Club would care about things like greenhouse gas emissions, and would care about renewable resources, and would care about sequestering carbon. Forestry is how we sequester carbon. You know, you go out, you plant more trees, that takes in more carbon. The wood you cut down, you use that to build. It's much better than using steel or concrete or cement if greenhouse gases are how you're measuring things. And instead, they try to kill the industry. It's mind-boggling, this short-term thinking of this. And I just wonder, like, what do you think people in BC are supposed to do? Like, we can't all work for the Sierra Club, or we can't all rely on government handouts for jobs. Like, people want to work, people want to have invested huge amounts of money and time and their livelihoods in this. We should be letting them.
BC, a third of its exports are connected to the lumber industry. What does that do to the overall economy if you cut it off at the knees?
Well, exactly. We've talked about this before with energy as well. And, you know, the less we send out, the less investment money flows in onto our shores. You know, and again, it's such a small number of trees that we're talking about as far as old growth forest. BC now harvests many trees. Most of the trees they harvest are trees that have been planted by the forestry industry as part of that renewable, you cut, you plant, you grow, you cultivate, you cut again, and the cycle goes on. 0.1% of the total forest area harvested in BC is old growth forest. 0.1%. You know, that is not, that's not a huge amount. Like, we're never going to run out of old growth forest because we're protecting 10 million hectares of it. I take the revenue side too. So, British Columbians, we're always talking about, there's communities that need new schools, there's new highways that need to be built, there's transit lines that need to be built, there's hospitals, there's recreation centers, all of that government infrastructure that we want more of. And, the forestry industry, every 8 hours generates $2 million in revenue to government. Every 8 hours. It's like round the clock. 2 million more, 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 2 million more. And that's a lot of money. That can't be, you shouldn't be shaking a stick at that. Like, that is money that gets invested into infrastructure, into government services. And that's on top of income tax. That's just the royalties. That's on top of all the other sales taxes and things like that that government or that individuals and businesses have to pay. So this is a big source of money for provincial government, especially. And now we're saying, we don't need it. You know what? Whatever. And 18,000 people out of luck. Well, you're out of a job. Sorry. It's they're doing the same thing to the mink farming industry, where there's 9 mink farms in BC, and they woke up one day and decided, nope, now mink farming in BC is illegal. Now, wherever you stand on, fur farming, I have my own views on it. Other people have views. Set that aside for a second. You're taking those. You're basically deciding one day with no consultation. Hey, we're actually killing this industry. All that money you've invested in your farm, all that money you've invested in jobs, all that money you've invested in the future, all that time and effort, all those good jobs you've created, they're all gone now because we're outlawing this particular this kind of farming, and that has huge consequences. And that's just for 9 families. Forestry, by getting rid of by bringing in these new rules, you're talking about 18,000 jobs. It's mind-boggling the scale of this, and I don't understand why the NDP are rushing into this, especially when some of their most important stakeholders, supporters, donors, like the Steelworkers Union, who represents forestry workers, are screaming from the mountaintops for them to stop and rethink this crazy plan.
Affordable housing, a big issue in British Columbia and across Canada. We get good, strong, reliable timber from BC. You shut that down. How much more expensive is that going to make it to build a house if you have to import lumber from New Zealand or from a clear-cut rainforest in South America?
Yeah, great point. Great point. all these costs drive up the price of housing. And also make it less, 18,000 families who'll be less able to afford a home because they'll be out of work. And you're exactly right. Like, BC has some of the most rigorous regulatory standards for harvesting logs and replanting of any jurisdiction in the world. And the wood will come from somewhere. And it can come from, South America and, places that maybe they don't treat people very well and they have human rights problems and, are more than happy to, tear down every tree in the landscape and send it over to us. So sure, we'll get wood from somewhere. It'll be more expensive and the social and human costs will be much higher. Not to mention the greenhouse gas emissions that it'll take to ship it here. Wood is a resource that we have in abundance, that we've been managing well for a long time, that we're protecting 10 million hectares of old growth forests. We need to take a real hard look at this policy. I don't think the NDP have any real sense as to just how important forestry is in these communities. And there are very few rural MLAs left for the NDP. My belief is there'll be even fewer of them after this policy because, the Up Island, they may vote NDP, but those are forestry towns. And, I'm sitting here, I'm on the 8th floor of a, steel and concrete building here in Surrey, and I'm looking out into the landscape, and, there's other steel and glass and concrete buildings. But Surrey is a forestry town as well. There's hundreds of jobs here that rely on the forestry industry, hundreds of jobs that rely on this, on wood and this material. So, by shutting down this industry, you're shutting jobs down in Surrey as well, and in Langley, where, in Gloucester Industrial Estate and Aldergrove, there are companies there that process these logs, that turn them into furniture and doors and cupboards and other things. Like, people rely on this stuff. And now you're saying, well, yeah, on a whim, on the recommendation of 4 people, without even consulting Indigenous interests, no, we're going to get rid of it. All done. It's a mind-boggling decision.
Could you see court challenges to it?
Well, that's a good question. So I know the COFI, I think Coalition of Forest Industries, and the Truck Loggers Association. These are organizations who do amazing work advocating for forestry and forestry workers. I'm not privy to their internal discussions, but I bet you I would believe every option's on the table for them. I've been listening to their ads. Oh, this is the other thing. So they make this crazy decision, government, and then they spend government dollars, taxpayer dollars, forest taxpayer dollars, by the way, on an ad campaign patting themselves on the back for how great they are for making this decision. And really they're trying to head off, the truck loggers and COFI and other companies from, and their member companies from presenting the truth about what's going on. This is exactly the kind of partisan advertising the NDP used to scream at the BC Liberals about when they were in opposition. And now they're rushing and spending as much dough as they can on these campaigns. Whoa, Jim, you've got me all riled up here. I'm sorry to your listeners if they're listening and trying to, find a moment of zen in all this. I certainly don't have one. This one's really bugged me, and I think it's coming out on the podcast here.
Where I live in a high-rise in New Westminster, I overlook the Fraser River, and I watch the tugboats pulling the log booms around every day. Well, those jobs are in danger. Have they even thought about the marine industries connected to logging?
You're talking about quite literally downstream jobs.
Yes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's why I was trying to make the point. Like, Surrey is a logging town. New Westminster is a logging town. Richmond's a logging town. You may not think it because, you don't see folks driving around in pickup trucks with axes and the big equipment that goes out and harvests these logs. And, rarely will you see a truck full of logs drive through. But they are all of these downstream jobs, right up into including construction. Why am I, VP of a construction association, so passionate about this? Because builders use wood and need a safe, affordable supply of wood in order to build basically everything we build in British Columbia. This is how we house ourselves. It's a head-scratching decision by a government that's putting ideology before the good of the province. And I'm hopeful that the forest industry continues to fight. You can darn well be sure that ICBA will be standing alongside them every step of the way. and that we can somehow change the government's mind on this.
What if you had to switch to steel and concrete to build a BC home? How much more expensive would that be than a home using traditional wood techniques?
Oh, you'll double or triple the price. And that's if you could find enough steel and concrete to do it. Remember, we already have shortages of those supplies. We don't manufacture enough of them in Canada. We have to bring it in from Asia. That's expensive. There's huge supply shortages, specifically in things like steel and concrete and other important parts of construction. So wood, how many times, Jim, in the past 20 years have we talked about, wood is good. That's what Gordon Campbell used to say. And, talking about building high-rises, using more wood in high-rises, using more wood in public buildings. That was a BC goal for a long time, and for good reason. We wanted to showcase, we want to be part of the innovative uses of lumber and wood for these kind of larger construction projects. And we created whole industries out of it. Around the world, they come and take a look at what we do with wood and mimic it, because it's, a renewable resource that sequesters carbon. Like, this is what we need more of, not less of. And that just, the whole thing is, it really does discourage you about the state of the BC economy, where the BC government is taking us, and how little respect they pay to working people and to Indigenous rights.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, we know there's supply chain problems around the planet. How's that affecting the construction industry right now?
I wasn't sure I'd ever hear the end of COVID from our construction members. And, for years they've talked to us about labor shortages, and that's still going on. But I have to say that, the vast majority of calls we get now revolve around the supply shortage. And the supply chain is not keeping up. It's struggling, and we're having more and more trouble locating everything from paint to mechanical to electrical panels to steel. It's becoming more and more difficult for companies to meet the demands of consumers. And I know for 2022, a lot of subcontractors are talking to their general contractors, to their project owners, and preparing them for the fact that, look, this might be delayed because we can't actually get the supplies we need in order to build these things. So, yeah, it is an ever-present problem. It keeps the construction industry up at night, worrying about it, trying to find solutions, and there's a constant balance going on between today's projects and tomorrow's, trying to make sure that there's enough supply for everything.
On the labor front, is there any solution to the labor shortage?
There's no short-term solution, but there are longer-term ones. Immigration is one, bringing more people to Canada. Education is another. Modernizing the BC's training on these things. Right now, there's a number of schools for apprentices in BC that are oversubscribed. So, you want to go to a school to get your ticket, your red seal, you're waiting at least a year, maybe two, sometimes more. That is not good. When people make the decision to get their red seal, we should be getting them into those programs as quickly as possible. And then you have the old school programs, where they basically make you quit your job. If you live in another part of the province, move down to the Lower Mainland, because that's the only place where they're located, and sit in a classroom day after day in order to get your ticket. We've been pushing at ICBA as many different options as possible. So we have a Red Seal Challenge program for painting and decorators, where we work with them after hours, not during work hours. They can still work. They can live anywhere they want in the province. We do it online through webinars and live video. And we work with them on preparing them to challenge for their Red Seal. It's been very successful. We're on to our third group of students. We're graduating something like 75% of them. The ones that haven't graduated yet, we'll take the test again, and we'll keep working with them until they make it through. That's what needs to happen. There's a plumbing college, one of the biggest plumbing colleges in all of BC, PVC it's called, Pacific Vocational College. They've trained the vast majority of plumbers in BC for a long time. And to their credit, with COVID, they pivoted. They've put more online, and what they do is they actually send packages to their students of like 3D printed piping and other, little units. And those kids, not kids, but those young men and women, they sit there doing their apprenticeship and they put these things together on video with an instructor watching and helping them and guiding them all along the way. And it teaches them what to do, and it prepares them for their Red Seal test. So there are new innovative ways of doing this. We just need government to encourage and push schools to do these things in more new innovative ways, not make people quit their jobs up north and move down to the Lower Mainland to try to get their Red Seal, and invest more in training, not for unions, not just for open shop, but for all aspects of the construction industry, no matter how your workforce is organized.
Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in BC. His website, icba.ca. If you have any questions for Jordan or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.